Hey everyone, welcome back to my Purest Alchemy channel. This is my Purest Alchemy channel where we talk about case studies, we talk about experiences, all things under the sun that come to my mind, and the things like I wrote this piece a couple of days ago about addiction. I fully believe that addiction is creative energy with nowhere to go. Of course, addiction is very complex. It's symptomized as a disease, it's diagnosed as a disease. And I believe that it's true, but I also believe that when you break down the etymology of dis-ease, it's dis and then ease, right? So it's the dysfunction of ease. So how can one bring themselves back into order? How can one bring themselves back into ease? And it's not easy when it's a dysfunction, when it's an addiction. That the people who have the heaviest addictions, from what I've seen in my personal life, they're extremely gifted, either psychically, sensitively, creatively. But the addiction acts as a buffer for the amount of information, the amount of feelings the person isn't allowing themselves to experience, to feel. And this stems from usually suppression or not being understood, not being acknowledged, not being heard, right? So the addiction acts as a buffer. Know that addiction can also stem from a lack of nurturing from the ages of like 0 to 5 years old. If a parent misses out on these fundamental years of a child's or of a baby, of a toddler's life, it can cause the child to have a lifelong oral fixation. And if you don't know what oral fixation is, it is the process of self-soothing through the mouth. So that could be a bottle, that could be a cigarette, that could be your thumb, right? That usually the individual that is dealing with addiction has so many different gifts. I've seen people who were extremely creative deal with addiction. Like, let's say this person that I knew, that we were cool, like we were really good friends, extremely creative when it came down to drawing, extremely creative. I'm talking about lines were super straight, like they were extremely gifted. But I believe that because they weren't allowed to express their feelings and their emotions, they weren't being heard in the correct ways. That energy of being unheard, that energy of feeling misunderstood, it needs somewhere to go. And if the person isn't conscious of how the self-soothing would come about in this time, because they're not getting that self-soothing from their environment, they're gonna turn to something that is more tangible, something that they can really hold to hold them, if that makes sense. So I've seen it turn out in a way of like that person is not gonna just automatically turn to drawing as a self-soothing coping mechanism. The person is gonna turn to something that can soothe their nervous system, because what they're experiencing when they're being unheard, when they're not being acknowledged, is the memories of that are stuck in their nervous system of when they did not have that self-soothing as children. For whatever reason, the parents couldn't be there. This is not to blame, but it's more so just about the nervous system remembering. And the nervous system is going to grab anything that is going to allow them to get to a point where there is a relaxation of the mind, there's a relaxation of the body. I don't really judge addiction at all, or let's say people who are addicts on the street. I don't judge them, because 9 times out of 10, somewhere along the way definitely failed them. They failed to nurture them. They failed to guide them. They failed to watch after them. I have noticed that if you don't have the language to heal yourself, then you're going to be continuously shaming yourself. Oh, I want to stop, or I don't want to stop. I want to stop doing this, but I don't know how. I don't know how to stop myself. A person usually has to go back into the earliest memories that they have and find the deepest compassion for themselves for what they did or what they didn't get. And the thing that I've noticed about people who have addiction or addictive personalities, addictive tendencies, they can focus on things for a very, very long time. But it really just depends on where their focus is going. You know, like a person could have an addiction to weed, for example. If that person isn't conscious, then the weed addiction just gets out of control, and then they're spending their money on weed, and then they're doing this and then they're doing that. And that causes a person to feel like, oh, you know, I'm not doing this with myself, or the weed just helps me out, or whatever the case may be. But what they don't realize is that that same amount of energy that you could be using to smoke so much, you could be using that to create. And that's usually where the healing starts, because there comes a certain point in time where when it comes down to addiction, yeah, you have to like go through like the typical 8-8 things where you write out all the people that you've hurt, you apologize, you atone yourself, etc. But then there comes a certain point in time where you need to create. You need to create, because the creation is a form of healing within itself. When there are no words that you can constantly express, healing is in the work that you do. So if that means coloring, if that means taking the time out to build stuff, if that means taking the time out to cook yourself a meal, if that means taking the time out to spend time with loved ones, if that means taking the time out to create art projects, or fully immerse yourself into something that feeds your brain and feeds your hands, then that's what is the gateway to healing, something that is enabling you to not reach your highest self. People with addiction, even myself, I have an addictive personality, but I don't identify with that as much as I'm extremely creative, I'm extremely sensitive, and I'm extremely perceptive. And sometimes when you have that much perception or you have that much sensitivity, it can weigh on you, you know. So you'll find a lot of people who are very sensitive psychically, if they're sensitive energetically, if they're sensitive to the way the state of the world is. It's extremely important to understand that those people are going to find ways to self-soothe because they're having a hard time grounding the information that they're receiving from the outside world or from their environment. And for me, you know, I've dealt with addiction. There are times where I still pick up, you know, a glass of wine. I still pick up the vape. I rarely don't smoke anymore, but when I was growing up, I used to have heavy addiction to like weed or to drinking. And I'm not ashamed to talk about that, because I realized that for myself, I was experiencing a lack, right? I was experiencing a lack of nurturing for certain things, like for myself, right? Like I was experiencing a lack of understanding within my environment, or just extreme amounts of psychic sensitivity when it came down to what I was picking up from people energetically. And that caused me to want to drown out the noise. And that's also a common thing with people who are in addiction, right? But the thing is, I had to learn that this amount of energy that I use to frolic and be in addiction and like engage with shame in a way where I beat myself up, that same energy can be used in a way where I'm obsessing over the greatness of my life and how I want my life to look and working towards that. The thing is that addiction and obsession could be hand in hand, right? You can be addicted to anything. You can literally be addicted to gaming. You could be addicted to relationships. You could be addicted to cigarettes. You could be addicted to anything. But in the same capacity, you can be obsessed with creating a better way for yourself. And with this amount of obsession that you use, it allows you to follow through with that. Addiction is just obsession with nowhere to go. Addiction is going to tell you that you know that you're supposed to be doing something else with yourself. You know that you could be doing better, or this, that, and the third. And then obsession is actually doing it, right? And I'm not talking about being obsessed with people. I'm not talking about being obsessed with a relationship. I'm talking about being obsessed with becoming and opening the doors to the best version of your life, right? And that allows you to understand that, oh, this energy that I was using towards smoking weed, towards popping pills, towards, I could be using the energy of what I've learned from those experiences and that energy itself to create abundance in my life. How do I do that? By tapping into your natural born gifts. This excerpt about obsession, even it said, obsession is power when channeled correctly. It is all about your focus. I grew up obsessing or in limerence towards my crushes, information, self-improvement, rumination of the past. I quite literally could not stop obsessing over my object of affection. The pain of experiencing great loss left me constantly trying to make sense and meaning of what was gone. Even when I knew I had to let go, I felt shame at not being able to turn my brain off until I met somebody named Antonio. Antonio was heavy into smoking weed, and I noticed his addiction to it, and it made me perceive addiction differently. One day I asked if he ever feels obsessed with certain things, and he said yes. I said that may not be a bad thing if you know how to channel it, and he smiled and nodded. I perceived addiction and obsession in the same octave in that moment. Who would Robert Downey Jr. be if he hadn't switched his vices? Would he have been able to make Iron Man if he kept filtering his energy into drugs and alcohol? He became obsessed with his self-actualization, a shift in where you place your focus when you feel like your ability to cope is outside of the home within yourself. You look and cling to something outside of you. Addiction numbs obsession and exacerbates shame. All of the greats have been through a hero's journey, right? Malcolm X went through a hero's journey when he went to prison, and he was learning about words and the etymology of words, and how his life was in direct correlation to the experiences that he went through. Like, he was a pimp at a certain time, and then he shifted his gears through learning and, of course, hitting rock bottom, right? Hitting rock bottom led him to experiencing different shifts in how he saw himself and how he saw Black people and how he saw energy when it came down to defending yourself. So he had to go through that hero's journey because he was already living a life that was fast-paced, high cortisol, etc., right? And and he didn't have like a knowledge of self, right? And then he became one of the most prolific speakers of his time. The same thing with Robert Downey Jr. Robert Downey Jr. was an addict before he became Iron Man, but he put all of his energy into creating a way for himself to see himself outside of addiction. Who are you outside of these things that you do to cope? What stories are you telling yourself about what your greatness is or who you are at a fundamental level? I've always seen people who have addictions be extremely great at certain things, but there are blockages that hold them back from seeing that, right? Because they're too consumed with who they're not or who they have to be, and then there's so much shame language behind their gifts. So their gifts are right in front of them, and they actively work on those. But what's stopping them from understanding their greatness is the fact that they have this filter or this buffer that numbs those things that are supposed to come up. You're supposed to feel the shame. You're supposed to feel guilt. You're supposed to feel the emptiness of what you did or what you didn't get, because that is where the gold lies. That's what allows you to hold more in your body about what you can or what you can't do. And shame also blocks you from trying new things, right? Like, if you were a child and you went through like experiences where you were shamed a lot for just natural things, then that's going to cause you to get older and just find the easiest form of gratification to soothe you when it comes down to hard things, such as, let's say you want to try building a car. You want to try building a car and you fail at first, and because you failed, you're like, fuck, like I'm not good enough. There's thoughts in your head that go behind, like, you suck, you're not good enough, you're this, you're that. That's gonna stop you from wanting to try again. and try again and try again. And that's where addiction comes in, where it soothes you from having to deal with those hard things, those hard beliefs, those hard set beliefs in your mind and in your body and your nervous system that stop you from trying again and being bad at something, right? Even for me, I have dealt with addictive tendencies in my life, but I'm extremely creative. But there are times where I'm hard on myself. And because I'm hard on myself, or I experience self-doubt, it'll be channeled into something where I know it's not as productive. But I've been actively working on myself, because I already know that there's no limit to where I can take it when I believe in myself. And when you put your heart and your mind to something, it allows you to grow past the confines of those beliefs, because you basically challenge those beliefs through every action that you take. And that's the important part about retraining your nervous system. It basically allows you, and it tells you that you're not good enough, you're this, you're that, whatever. But then as you keep going and as you keep reaching new heights, you basically tell your nervous system, it's okay to be different. It's okay to try different things. I'm not gonna die. I'm not gonna fail just because. And if I do fail, I know that that's data for me to try again, or try in a different way, or pivot, etc. I wanted to basically make this video to always express that it's important to be as compassionate with yourself as possible when it comes down to addiction. If you're in active addiction, or if you have dealt with addiction, it's important to name those things that ail you. It's so important to be as compassionate as possible with yourself and others that are struggling with addiction, because 9 times out of 10, what you're experiencing or what you're witnessing is a person that doesn't really believe in themselves enough to do something different, right? Like to create a different way for themselves. And don't ever think that a person is just gonna be stuck there, right? Don't ever think to yourself like that's the ending of them. Even though it's really difficult with addiction, like if a person can go through their hero's journey and survive their negative perception of themselves, then they can change and they can become everything that they need to become. But even if a person doesn't get there, it doesn't take away from who they truly are beneath their core. And that's the thing about addiction. It's like, it's something that you have to really, really, really get to know. It's something that you have to get to know. It's something that you have to sit with. And it's something that you have to be able to not shame yourself about, because you're already dealing with a lot of shame from what you did or what you didn't get, or whatever the case may be. So it's really important to understand how when you are in active addiction, or you're seeing people with active addiction, there are times where it's intricate with every case, but understand that 9 times out of 10, those people have extreme gifts. Like, they're extremely gifted, extremely talented. And most times when you are in close connection with somebody who is experiencing addiction, you just want them to see, like, you don't have to live like this, or whatever the case may be. But that's not something that can be forced on by you. That's something that that person has to go through and choose for themselves. And even if, let's say, they don't choose that for themselves, it doesn't make them any less worthy. They have to see it for themselves. They have to perceive themselves differently. It's basically an identity shift. Like, they have to have an identity shift, and that takes time. It takes effort, and I have a lot of compassion for people who have addiction. I really do. Like, I feel like it's not easy, because you're dealing with something that is something where you didn't have control over the way that you were nurtured. So it's something that it's like a lifelong thing that a person has to really, really grow, and they really have to give themselves a chance to grow. They have to give themselves a chance to understand themselves beyond the limiting beliefs that they have. So I wanted to talk about this today because I have been thinking about it for a really long time, and I wanted to give a different, or offer a different perspective when it comes down to addiction and when it comes down to obsession. Now, I want everybody to understand that I'm not talking about obsession when you are like stalking somebody. I'm not talking about that. Obsession can be filtered and it can be used in ways where you bullshit your life up. And that's usually what you want to use obsession for, because it's a very powerful energy. An addiction, it's just like a blinder. It's like a person that's dealing with a blinder on top of their true nature. I know that Michael Jackson dealt with obsession, but look at what he used for his obsession. Like, his obsession was rooted in creating a different way for himself, a different way, a breakout entertainer for the industry, and he did that. So I want everybody to understand that when you are obsessed with something, there's no limits to where you can take it. And I mean something, not someone, something. Everybody has the capability to be obsessed with their greatest self, with the thing that they love, right? But it's important to be present with it too. So yeah, I think that's all I have to say. Thank you so much for watching. Like, comment, share, subscribe. I appreciate you guys so much for watching. Love you. Purest Alchemy out.